My name is Margaret, and I'm 62 years old now. As I sit in my beautiful sunroom, surrounded by the orchids I've learned to cultivate, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, it's hard to believe that just 3 years ago, I was homeless, pregnant, and completely alone. People always ask me how I found the strength to rebuild my life after losing everything. The truth is, I didn't know I had that strength until I had no other choice but to find it. You see, sometimes life has a way of stripping away everything you think defines you, until you're left with nothing but your core self. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you discover that your core self is made of steel, not glass. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, from the life I thought I had built so carefully, so lovingly, only to watch it crumble around me when I needed it most. For 35 years, I lived in the same house on Maple Street, a modest two-story colonial with blue shutters and a wraparound porch where I used to serve lemonade to my children and their friends. I had married young, at 19, to Robert, a man 7 years my senior, who worked at the local manufacturing plant. We had 3 children together: Michael, Sarah, and David. Robert passed away 8 years ago from a heart attack, leaving me the house, a small life insurance policy, and what I thought was the unwavering love and support of my children. After Robert died, I threw myself into being the perfect mother and grandmother. I was the one who hosted every holiday dinner, who babysat whenever needed, who helped with down payments on cars and emergency expenses. My kitchen table was the gathering place for family meetings, homework help, and heart-to-heart conversations. I took pride in being the family's anchor, the one everyone could depend on. I used my widow's pension and Robert's life insurance money not on myself, but on making sure my family had everything they needed. Michael, my eldest, had always been ambitious, but struggled with money management. I helped him through to failed business ventures, covering his debts both times. Sarah, my only daughter, was a single mother raising 2 teenagers, and I regularly helped with school expenses and after-school care. David, my youngest, had been laid off from his job and was living in my basement with his wife, Jennifer, supposedly saving money for their own place. I didn't mind. I thought this was what family meant, being there for each other, no matter what. Looking back, I can see the signs I chose to ignore. The way my children's eyes would glaze over when I talked about my own day, how they would immediately steer conversations back to their problems, their needs, their wants, the way they would exchange glances when they thought I wasn't looking, as if they were sharing some private joke at my expense. But I was so focused on nurturing and giving that I didn't notice I had become invisible as a person in their eyes. I was just a resource to them, a problem solver, a bank account with a grandmother's smile. The first real crack in my perfect family facade appeared when I started experiencing unusual symptoms. At 59, I was getting dizzy spells, morning nausea, and my body felt different in ways I couldn't quite explain. My children were so absorbed in their own lives that they barely noticed when I mentioned feeling unwell. "Maybe you need more vitamins, Mom," Sarah would say dismissively, "or you're just getting older," from Michael. But something deep inside me knew this was different. The day I went to see Dr. Harrison for what I thought would be a routine checkup changed everything. I still remember sitting in his office, looking at the family photos on his desk. When he walked in with my test results, his expression was a mixture of amazement and concern. "Margaret," he said gently, "I have some very unexpected news. You're pregnant." The words hit me like a physical blow. Pregnant at 59. It seemed impossible, but Dr. Harrison explained that while extremely rare, it can happen during perimenopause, when hormone levels are fluctuating unpredictably. My mind immediately went to Robert's brother, Thomas, who had been staying with me occasionally since his wife passed away 6 months earlier. What had started as comfort between 2 lonely people had developed into something deeper, something I hadn't expected at this stage of my life. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. This should have been shocking but also somehow wonderful. A new life, a chance to experience motherhood again with the wisdom that comes with age. Thomas and I had been talking about making our relationship official, about not spending our remaining years alone. I imagined telling my children, imagined their surprise turning to joy, imagined them rallying around me during this unexpected chapter of my life. How naive I was. That evening, I gathered my family in the living room. David and Jennifer came up from the basement. Michael drove over after work, and Sarah brought her teenagers. I looked around at all these faces I loved so much, took a deep breath, and shared my news. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Michael started laughing, a bitter, cruel sound I had never heard from him before. "You've got to be kidding me, Mom. You're 59 years old. This is disgusting." Sarah's face had gone pale, then red with what I realized was anger, not embarrassment for my situation. How could you be so irresponsible? What will people think? What will people say about our family? But it was David who delivered the killing blow. Mom, you can't seriously be considering keeping this baby. You're too old. This is selfish and ridiculous. You need to take care of this problem quietly. Problem, my child. This unexpected gift was a problem to them. I tried to explain about Thomas, about how we cared for each other, about how this didn't have to be a crisis, but could be a celebration. But their minds were already made up. In their eyes, I had transformed overnight from their reliable, invisible mother into an embarrassing burden. The next few weeks were hell. My children's initial shock hardened into cold disapproval. They stopped bringing the grandchildren over. They stopped calling to check on me. When I would reach out to them, their conversations were clipped, formal, and always ended with subtle pressure about what I should do about my condition. They made it clear that if I continued with this pregnancy, I was on my own. The cruelest blow came from Sarah, who had always been Daddy's little girl, but whom I thought understood the complexities of being a woman. She came over one Tuesday afternoon, her face set in hard lines I didn't recognize. Mom, I've been thinking, and I've talked to the boys. We think it's time you considered moving to a senior community. This house is too big for you anyway, and with your situation, you're clearly not making good decisions anymore. I stared at her, my own daughter, suggesting I was mentally incompetent because I was pregnant. Sarah, this is my home. I raised you children here. This is where your father, Dad, is dead. Mom, and you're acting like a foolish old woman chasing after some fantasy. Thomas is using you. Can't you see that? And now you want to bring a baby into this mess? It's time to be realistic. That's when I realized that my children didn't see me as a whole person, with desires, dreams, and the right to make my own choices. To them, I was supposed to be a sexless grandmother, whose only purpose was to serve their needs and maintain their comfortable image of what their family looked like. The breaking point came in my 4th month of pregnancy. I was showing now, and morning sickness had been replaced by that particular glow that comes with carrying new life. Thomas had proposed, and we were making plans for a small wedding, and preparing one of the upstairs bedrooms as a nursery. I was happier than I had been since Robert died, despite my children's disapproval. That's when David and Jennifer delivered their ultimatum. They came upstairs from the basement where they had been living rent-free for 8 months, and David's face was cold as winter. Mom, Jenny and I have been talking. We can't continue to live in a house where you're making such poor choices. It's affecting our mental health and our ability to save money for our future. I was confused. But David, you don't have to leave. This doesn't affect. No, Mom. You don't understand. We're not leaving. You are. The words hit me like a slap. What do you mean? Jennifer stepped forward, and I saw a calculation in her eyes that made my blood run cold. We've been looking into this, Margaret, legally, since David has been living here and contributing to household expenses. Contributing? I interrupted. You've never paid rent, utilities, or even groceries. We've been maintaining the property, David said smoothly. And Mom, let's be honest, you're clearly not competent to make major life decisions right now. This pregnancy is proof of that. We think it would be best if you signed the house over to us. We'll take care of everything. I realized in that moment that they had planned this. While I was nurturing what I thought was a loving family, they had been calculating how to get their hands on my assets. The house wasn't just my home. It was my security, my equity, the fruit of 35 years of mortgage payments that Robert and I had made. Absolutely not, I said firmly. This is my house. I'm not signing anything over to anyone. David's mask finally slipped completely. Fine, Mom. Then you need to choose us or this ridiculous old woman pregnancy fantasy. But you can't have both. If you're determined to embarrass this family and make these selfish choices, then you can do it somewhere else. Michael and Sarah, it turned out, were in on the plan too. They had all agreed that if I didn't terminate my pregnancy and sign over the house, they would cut me off completely. No support during my pregnancy, no help with the baby, no relationship with my grandchildren. They presented this as though they were the reasonable ones, as though I was the one breaking up the family. I called Thomas, sobbing, but discovered that my children had gotten to him too. Michael had visited him at work, painting a picture of me as a mentally unstable woman, going through some kind of breakdown. He convinced Thomas that the kindest thing would be to step back and let my family handle the situation. When I reached Thomas that night, he was distant, confused, apologetic but clear. He couldn't handle the drama and conflict I brought into his life. Within 2 weeks, I found myself with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. My children had poisoned my relationship with Thomas, isolated me from my grandchildren, and made it clear that continuing my pregnancy meant losing my family forever. I was 4 months pregnant, 59 years old, and homeless. I spent my first night sleeping in my car in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, my hands resting on my growing belly, wondering how my life had fallen apart so completely. I had given everything to my family, my time, my money, my identity, and the moment I tried to claim something for myself, they discarded me like garbage. The next few weeks were a blur of cheap motels, social services offices, and the crushing weight of realizing that the people I had loved most in the world saw me as disposable. I was too proud to beg them to take me back, too hurt to compromise my values by terminating a pregnancy I wanted, and too scared to imagine how I would raise a baby at 60 with no support system. I remember sitting in a McDonald's bathroom one morning, looking at myself in the mirror, my hair unwashed, my clothes wrinkled from sleeping in my car, my face gaunt from stress and morning sickness. I looked like exactly what my children had accused me of, being, a pathetic old woman who had lost her mind. For a moment, I almost believed them. Maybe I was foolish. Maybe I should just do what they wanted. But then the baby moved, just a little flutter, like a butterfly landing inside me. And suddenly, I remembered who I was before I became Robert's wife and my children's mother. I was Margaret Elizabeth Thompson, and I had been strong once. I had worked 2 jobs to put myself through community college. I had managed a household budget for 35 years. I had raised 3 children and kept a marriage together through good times and bad. I had survived my husband's death and learned to be alone without being lonely. Somewhere along the way, I had forgotten that I was a whole person, not just a collection of roles I played for other people. That's when I remembered the storage unit. Robert had rented a storage unit about 15 years earlier when his mother passed away. We had stored her furniture and belongings there, intending to sort through everything someday. After Robert died, I had continued paying the monthly fee automatically, but I had never gone back to deal with the contents. It was just another item on the long list of things I kept meaning to handle, but never found time for between taking care of everyone else's needs. I drove to the storage facility that afternoon, key in hand, with no idea what I might find. The unit was packed to the ceiling with furniture covered in old sheets, boxers labeled in Robert's mother's careful handwriting, and the musty smell of things long forgotten. I started pulling boxes forward, looking for anything that might be useful, maybe some furniture I could sell, or household items I could use if I ever found a place to live. 3 hours later, covered in dust and increasingly frustrated, I opened a small wooden jewelry box that had been tucked behind a mirror. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a packet of papers and a small brass key. The papers were property deeds, not just for one property, but for 3 small rental houses in a neighboring town. Robert's mother, it turned out, had been quietly buying and renting out properties for decades. She had never told anyone in the family about her little real estate empire. There was also a bank statement from an account I had never heard of, showing a balance of over $80,000. The brass key opened a safety deposit box. The documentation was all there. Robert's mother had left everything to Robert in her will, which meant it had passed to me when he died. I had been sitting on a small fortune for 8 years and never known it. I sat in that dusty storage unit, 8 months pregnant and homeless, holding the keys to my independence in my trembling hands. All those years of scraping together money to help my children. All those times I had worried about making ends meet on my pension, and I had had resources I never knew about. The next morning, I visited the lawyer whose name was on the property documents. He confirmed what I had suspected. I was the legal owner of 3 rental properties and a substantial bank account. More importantly, the houses were currently vacant. The property management company had been depositing rents into the account automatically, but without the previous owner's direction, they had stopped actively seeking tenants months earlier. I drove to see the houses that afternoon. They were small but well maintained, in a quiet neighborhood about an hour away from Maple Street. One of them, a little 2-bedroom cottage with a fenced yard and mature apple trees, seemed to call out to me. It had good bones, plenty of natural light, and something my old house had never really had. It felt like a place where I could start fresh. Within a month, I had moved into the cottage. I used money from the account to make it comfortable. New paint, some furniture, a rocking chair by the window where I could sit and plan my new life. I hired the property management company to get the other 2 houses rented, providing me with a steady income stream I had never expected to have. The baby was born on a snowy February morning. Thomas Michael. I named him for the 2 men who had shaped my adult life, one who had loved me faithfully and one who had awakened me to possibility. even briefly. He was perfect and healthy, with Robert's eyes and what I imagined was my stubborn chin. Holding him in my arms, I felt a completeness I hadn't realized I was missing. I threw myself into motherhood with the patience and wisdom that comes with age. I had learned from raising my first 3 children, understood now how precious and fleeting these early years are. I wasn't stressed about returning to work or managing a marriage alongside parenting. This was my time to simply be present with my child. I also discovered I had a talent for business. Managing the rental properties came naturally to me. All those years of household management had taught me about budgets, maintenance, and dealing with people. I gradually bought 2 more properties, renovated them myself with the help of contractors, and built a small but profitable real estate portfolio. By the time Tommy was 2, I was financially stable, emotionally healthy, and genuinely happy in ways I hadn't been for years. I had friends in my new community, neighbors who helped with babysitting, and a sense of purpose that wasn't entirely dependent on other people's needs. I hadn't heard from my children in almost 3 years when Sarah's call came. It was a Tuesday evening in March. Tommy was playing with blocks on the living room floor, chattering to himself in the way 2-year-olds do. When the phone rang, Sarah's voice was strained and unfamiliar. "Mom, it's Sarah. I need to talk to you." My heart pounded. Part of me had never stopped hoping for this call, but another part of me had built walls around the hurt they had caused. "Hello, Sarah. Mom, I know it's been a long time, and I know things ended badly between us, but I need your help." Her voice cracked, and I could hear tears. "It's Madison." Madison was her 16-year-old daughter, my granddaughter, whom I hadn't seen since she was 13. "What's wrong with Madison?" "She's pregnant, Mom. She's 16 and pregnant, and she wants to keep the baby. Her boyfriend left when he found out. She's scared and angry, and I don't know what to do. I've been thinking about what we put you through, and I realize now how horrible we were." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of irony. My teenage granddaughter was facing an unplanned pregnancy with no support, just as I had faced my unexpected pregnancy alone at 59. "Sarah," I said carefully, "why are you calling me now?" The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she had hung up. Then she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Because you're the only person I know who was brave enough to choose love over fear. And Madison needs someone who understands what it means to fight for your child when everyone else thinks you're making a mistake." Over the next 20 minutes, Sarah told me everything. How she had divorced Madison's father 2 years earlier and was struggling financially. How Michael's latest business venture had failed spectacularly, leaving him bankrupt and bitter. How David and Jennifer had lost the house, my house, to foreclosure when David was laid off again, and they couldn't make the mortgage payments on their own. They were all struggling in ways they had never imagined when they thought I was the weak link in the family. "Mom," Sarah said finally, "I know we don't deserve your help. I know we treated you terribly, but Madison, she's just a child, and she's scared. Would you consider letting her stay with you for a while? I could pay you something, not much." "But Sarah," I interrupted gently, "you don't need to pay me to help my granddaughter." The relief in her voice was audible. "So you'll help." I looked at Tommy, who had built a tower of blocks and was now carefully placing a toy car on top. My son, who would grow up knowing his mother as a strong, independent woman who made her own choices and lived with the consequences. My son, who would learn that family isn't about control or ownership, but about love and respect. "Yes," I said, "Madison can come stay with me. But Sarah, there are conditions." "Anything, Mom. Anything you want." "First, she comes here because she wants to, not because she's being pushed out. This isn't exile or punishment, it's support. Second, we talk honestly about what happened between us before she arrives. And third, you understand that I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago. I'm not going to sacrifice my peace or my boundaries to fix everyone else's problems." We talked for another hour. Sarah cried, apologized, tried to explain how fear and social expectations had made her cruel to her own mother. I listened, but I didn't absolve her. Some things can be forgiven, but they can't be forgotten, and they certainly can't be undone. Madison arrived the following weekend, sullen and defensive, her belly just beginning to show. She looked so much like Sarah had at that age, all sharp angles and wounded eyes. But over the next few weeks, as we talked and cooked together and prepared a nursery in my spare bedroom, I saw glimpses of the little girl I remembered, the one who used to help me plant flowers and listen to my stories about her grandfather. She was amazed by Tommy, charmed by his toddler antics and his immediate acceptance of her presence. "He doesn't judge me," she told me one afternoon as we watched him chase butterflies in the backyard. "Everyone else looks at me like I'm some kind of mistake. You're not a mistake, Madison, and neither is your baby." She was quiet for a long moment. "Grandma, were you scared when you found out about Uncle Tommy?" "Uncle Tommy, I liked that." "Terrified," I admitted, "but not of being a mother again. I was scared of being alone, of losing everyone I thought I loved." "But you weren't really alone, were you? You had Uncle Tommy." "Yes, I had Tommy, and I had something else I hadn't expected. What I had myself, the real me, not just the version of me that existed to make other people comfortable." Madison stayed with me until her daughter was born, a healthy, beautiful girl she named Emma. Watching her hold Emma for the first time, seeing the fierce love and protectiveness in her young face, I remembered that feeling, the way becoming a mother can transform you into someone you never knew you could be. Sarah visited regularly, slowly rebuilding our relationship through careful conversations and shared time with the babies. She never asked me to come back to the old life, never suggested I should return to being the family's safety net. I think she finally understood that the woman who had raised her was gone, replaced by someone stronger but less available for exploitation. Michael came once, awkward and proud, to meet his nephew and see his daughter. He didn't apologize directly, but he told Tommy he was lucky to have such a strong mom. David never came at all. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Now, as I write this, Tommy is 3 and Emma is 8 months old. Madison graduated high school and is taking online college classes while I help with childcare. We're not a traditional family, but we're a real one, built on choice and mutual respect, rather than obligation and guilt. My other rental properties are doing well, and I've even considered expanding the business. I never did remarry, though I've dated a bit. At 62, I'm not looking for someone to complete me. I'm complete on my own. If I find someone who adds joy to my life without requiring me to diminish myself, that would be wonderful. But I'm no longer afraid of being alone. Sometimes I drive past my old house on Maple Street. The yard is overgrown, the paint is peeling, and there's a for sale sign that's been there for months. I feel sad for the dreams that died there, but I don't feel regret. That house was part of a life I outgrew, and the woman who lived there was someone I needed to be for a while, but not forever. The most surprising thing about rebuilding your life in your 60s is discovering that it's not too late to become who you were always meant to be. I thought I was too old for adventure, to set in my ways for change, too dependent on other people's approval for independence. I was wrong about all of it. If you're listening to this story and you see yourself in it, if you're the person everyone takes for granted, the one who gives and gives until there's nothing left, let me tell you something important. You are not a supporting character in other people's stories. You are the protagonist of your own life, and it's never too late for your story to take a dramatic turn. The people who truly love you will support your growth, even when it's inconvenient for them. The ones who don't, well, they'll teach you the difference between love and control. And sometimes, losing people who don't really see you is the first step toward finding people who do. My name is Margaret. I'm 62 years old, and I'm just getting started.